Right now, as you're watching this video, your car, every truck on the highway, every plane in the sky, every tractor keeping food on your table, all of it runs on fuel that Australia does not make. We export coal to the world. We export gas. We literally sit on one of the richest energy deposits on the planet, and we can't fill our own petrol tank. Back in the 1970s, Australia had more than a dozen refineries running from Perth to Sydney. We refined our own fuel, controlled our own supply. Today, we import roughly 90% of our liquid fuel. How does a country do that to itself? Stick around, because this story is equal parts economics, politics, and a slow-motion disaster that most Australians have no idea is happening. Welcome to Only in Australia, where we cover the wild, the weird, and the what were they thinking of this incredible country. To understand how we got here, we need to go back. Picture Australia in the 1960s and 70s. The economy is booming. We're building cities, highways, suburban dreams. And fueling all of it, a network of over a dozen oil refineries spread across the country. Western Port in Victoria, Matraville and Clyde in Sydney, Port Stanback near Adelaide, Kwinana south of Perth, Bulwer Island in Brisbane, Altona in Melbourne, Kurnell on Sydney's coast. These weren't just industrial sites. They were symbols of a self-reliant nation. Australia dug things up, made things, and ran on its own fuel. The refineries were importing around 70% of their crude, but refining it here on home soil, which meant jobs, expertise, infrastructure, and most importantly, control. That control was about to quietly slip away. It didn't happen overnight. This was a slow-motion demolition job that lasted 4 decades, and the logic behind each closure, it made perfect sense on a spreadsheet. Here's the economic reality. Australian refineries were importing crude from long distances, and that high delivery cost made them uncompetitive compared to massive modern refineries in the US Gulf Coast or the Middle East. Meanwhile, Asia was building enormous state-of-the-art refining complexes in Singapore, South Korea, Japan, facilities that could process millions of barrels a day, far cheaper than anything Australia could match with its older, smaller plants. So the accountants made the call. Western Port closed in 1984, Matraville in 1985, Port Stanback in 2009, Clyde in New South Wales closed in 2012, Kurnell in 2014, Bulwer Island in Queensland in 2015. Then came the knockout punches. BP's Kwinana refinery south of Perth, operational for 65 years, ceased production in 2021. ExxonMobil's Altona refinery in Victoria shut the same year, and with each closure, Australian-flagged tankers disappeared from the fleet too. The ships that carried our own fuel around our own coastline, gone. The free market had spoken. Cheaper fuel from Asia, ship it in, problem solved. Except, it wasn't solved. It was deferred. In 2005, Australia had 8 operating oil refineries. Today, only 2 remain. 2. Ampol's Lytton refinery in Brisbane and Viva Energy's Geelong refinery west of Melbourne. Between them, they supply less than 20% of Australia's daily fuel needs. Everything else arrives by tanker, mostly from Singapore, South Korea, Japan, and increasingly China. And here's the kicker. The only reason those 2 refineries still operate is a $2.3 billion taxpayer-funded subsidy called the Fuel Security Services Payment, introduced in 2021. It's essentially the government paying these companies to please, don't close. Ampol committed to keeping Lytton running until at least June 30th, 2027. Viva extended its Geelong commitment to June 30th, 2028. After that, nobody knows. This isn't energy policy. This is life support with an expiry date. For years, experts warned this was a ticking clock. Most people ignored it because the fuel kept flowing and the prices stayed manageable. Then 2026 happened. Following geopolitical tensions in the Middle East, the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow channel that normally carries around 1/5 of global oil and gas supply, faced disruption threats. For most countries, that means higher prices. For Australia, the concern isn't just crude oil supply, it's refined petrol, diesel, and jet fuel shipped from refineries across Asia Pacific. With roughly a month of petrol and diesel available under normal conditions, the system only functions because imports arrive continuously. Think about that. 36 days, that's our buffer. Across regional Australia, drivers reported local service stations rationing petrol. Farmers warned food prices could rise by as much as 50%. Analysts forecast regular unleaded could soar close to $3.50 a litre. Diesel powers freight, agriculture, mining and construction. Petrol keeps essential workers moving. Without secure supplies, supermarket shelves go bare, transport grinds to a halt, and regional communities get cut off. This isn't hypothetical anymore. It's happening. So the big question, can Australia rebuild its fuel independence? The honest answer, it's complicated, expensive, and politically painful, but not impossible. Here's what would need to happen. First, domestic refining. Ampol's CEO has publicly stated that Lytton could pivot toward biofuels like renewable diesel and sustainable aviation fuel. But that kind of transition requires serious investment, and investment requires certainty. Right now, there isn't much of that going around. Second, strategic reserves. Although the International Energy Agency requires members to hold the equivalent of 90 days of net imports, Australia still does not meet that benchmark. We store some of our emergency reserves overseas, including in the United States. Third, ships. Over the past 30 years, the number of Australian-flagged vessels has shrunk from 100 to barely 10. Without our own fleet, we depend on foreign ships operating under foreign rules during a crisis. Australia has taken some steps recently, establishing offshore reserves and expanding domestic stockholding obligations. And geographically, Darwin lies less than 4 days sailing from Singapore, making Northern Australia a logical hub for emergency fuel redistribution. The pieces could come together, but it would take political will, billions of dollars, and years of consistent policy. Three things Australian governments have historically struggled to maintain simultaneously. And that, right there, is the only in Australia paradox. We are one of the most resource-rich nations on Earth. We sell our gas to Japan, our coal to Korea, our iron ore to China. We power other countries' economies while quietly dismantling our own fuel security, one refinery at a time, because it was cheaper in the short term. The free market made perfect sense, right up until it didn't. The good news? Australians are starting to pay attention. You're watching this video. That matters. If this story blew your mind even a little, subscribe to Only in Australia. This is what we do here. We dig into the stories about this country that don't make the front page until it's almost too late. Drop a comment below. Do you think Australia should rebuild its refining industry, or is it too late? Let's talk.